We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The Home Office has warned that people smugglers who are exploiting vulnerable people through social media will face severe penalties. The last major hospital in Gaza is out of service after an Israeli raid. Dozens of severely injured patients are said to be at grave risk. And heavy fog has brought major disruption to airports ahead of one of the busiest travel days of the holiday season. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and political journalist, Alicia Fitzgerald. Welcome both. So let's take a quick look at what is on some of those front pages. Well, the continuing feud between the Tories and Reform UK steps up a notch in the Mail on Sunday with a story of Kemi Badenoch reportedly accusing TV channel GB News of giving favourable coverage to Reform leader Nigel Farage. The Sunday Telegraph leads with its own analysis, which it says shows that middle-class families face an £8,000 increase in their tax bills next year as a raft of Labour measures start to take effect. The Sunday Times, meanwhile, leads with comments by the Education Secretary that those same middle-class families are actually in favour of charging VAT on private school fees, which comes into force on Wednesday. The Observer leads with a warning to ministers that a huge 10-year backlog in repairs to crumbling NHS hospitals is now posing a high-risk threat to the safety of patients and staff. The Express says Britain is giving £4.5 million to help Ukraine track down and bring to justice the Russian army soldiers and commanders responsible for a series of atrocities since the Russian invasion. The moving story of two mums meeting, one whose daughter donated her heart to save the life of the other, is top story in the Mirror. The People has a story about a Coronation Street star's self-confessed drug use. More TV show alleged goings-on lead The Sun, this time about The Apprentice. And finally, rise of the killer robot fridges. The Star carries a warning from scientists, or boffins, of course, that our smart fridges could lead to a Terminator-style takeover of the world. Maybe. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Aubrey Allegretti and Alicia Fitzgerald. Welcome both for coming. So usually this period between Christmas and New Year can be a little bit slow for news, but we have been blessed. Well, we have as journalists, maybe not so much the Conservative Party, with the story rumbling on between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage, which has just taken a slightly different twist in the Daily Mail. So let's look at the front page there, so Mail on Sunday, rather. Kemi's fury at TV chiefs favouring Nigel Farage. So, Aubrey, first of all, tell us about the story.
This is the Christmas gift that keeps on giving for Nigel Farage.
Even on the 28th.
I'm sure he will be so upset at this story continuing into sort of day 5 now. Ultimately, this all boils down to the row that's been going on about Reform's claim that they've overtaken the number of party members that the Conservatives had. The Conservatives had 131,000. That's as of about October, when the leadership contest was held and Kemi Badenoch became leader. Reform are now at just shy of 150,000. I think they overtook the Tories on Boxing Day. Kemi Badenoch came out and accused Reform of effectively faking a live counter that was tracking this number, and there has erupted since a war of words. And now we sort of see the latest twist in this tale, which is the Mail on Sunday reporting that Kemi Badenoch met the chief executive of GB News just before Christmas, accused the TV station of giving too much of a platform to him, which is obviously a TV station where he hosts his own show, and I think most interestingly, according to the Mail on Sunday, raised the spectre of regulatory action. So that would sort of seem to suggest that she's suggesting some sort of punitive action to be taken against GB News if she were in a position to deliver it.
Yeah, and the chief executive, Angelos Frangopoulos. But Alicia, all of this kind of happened before the spat, or before the Boxing Day numbers were revealed and the latest spat with Farage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you could easily be fooled into thinking that this feud, or so-called feud, between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage is something that's just happened over the past few days, because that's where the public row has been. But this clearly states that actually Kemi Badenoch met with the head of GB News before Christmas, which shows that actually maybe this was kind of brewing under the surface a little bit before it all started to come out, and clearly Kemi Badenoch very angry. I think this whole row between the two leaders is definitely a flavour and a taste of what it's going to be like between these two very strong characters leading to very rival parties at the moment. And I think Conservative members and the public knew that if they voted in Kemi Badenoch as their leader, that this is what we could expect.
Yeah, although, I mean, this is a specific accusation of fraud, and actually Nigel Farage had said he'd give her 2 days to apologise and then potentially could sue. Do you think she should apologise?
Well, I don't think she's going to back down. And so what this is really amounting to is a sort of escalating war of words, which I don't think very many people in the Conservative Party is something that they think is a good idea to engage in. I think that some of them are questioning the wisdom of her getting involved in the first place, putting out tweets that were directly responding to reform surpassing the Conservatives on membership numbers, particularly as, you know, we're actually talking about sort of quite a trite issue here. Members of political parties does not equate success, as the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn showed. Yeah. They've been declining since the 1990s. So, you know, I'm surprised at the extent to which she seems to have risen to the bait and taken it.
You mentioned the tweet, so let's look at the Telegraph, the Sunday Telegraph there, because it mentions the latest twist. Musk slaps fake label on Badenoch's online posts. And so what Elon Musk has done, obviously, you know, a supporter of Reform UK, he slapped a community note on her original tweet.
He did, and I guess that's what happens and what a consequence will be if you annoy the person who owns the platform on which you're posting, I suppose. So obviously what Kemi Badenoch did was claim that Reform's figures, membership figures, were false, as Aubrey was just saying. Musk then went and slapped on, what, for those who don't use X as a platform, it's this note that you can add at the bottom of a tweet, X, what do we even call it? An X?
Yeah, X, yeah.
One of those, a post, where you can basically fact-check. It's where readers of the post will add some context.
Because it's about the
feel like
ticker being
something's
coded.
missing.
That was the specific accusation.
Yeah.
That it was coded to go up.
So Musk has gone and basically slapped a community note on these, saying that all of these claims are false and that actually Kemi Badenoch is lying to smear the Reform UK campaign. So quite a big move there from the owner of this platform. We know that he's been in a lot of talks with Nigel Farage and with Reform UK over the past few weeks about potential donations. And also another story, I think, that came out this morning was about Nigel Farage saying that Elon Musk will really help grow the youth platform vote for Reform. So definitely those two working together. And we can see there that Musk is using his power, I guess, on this very large social media platform with so many users.
What do you make of Musk wading in?
I think there are two issues that this raises. First of all, how much is what we saw in the US a template for what might happen in the UK? And what I mean by that is Elon Musk very explicitly and clearly supported Donald Trump in the US election and tried to use X to help bolster the Republican votes during the US election. So how much is X seeming to be very close with Nigel Farage an indicator that that is something that might happen in 3, 4, 5 years' time here as well? Elon Musk sort of directly participating in trying to help Nigel Farage to success when he runs in the next general election, as we presume he will. And then the second is actually, if you look further down this story, there are some comments from a website which is for grassroots Conservative members. And it's interesting that they are already starting to pile the pressure on Kemi Badenoch and suggesting that she is not learning the lessons quickly enough of how Reform has successfully been able to, they say, tap into particularly young voters who are Conservative with a small c, but being attracted to Reform, influenced by the same sort of MAGA-style campaigning that Nigel Farage has clearly learnt from Donald Trump. Those are, I think, the two main sort of bigger points out of this story.
OK, let's now take a look at the front page of the Sunday Times, which was an interesting poll by the think tank More in Common, which basically looks at what voting would look like if it took place now, which, is only 5 months after the last election, which really isn't very long. And some of the numbers are very interesting. Reform doing well, Conservatives not quite as badly as, some might have thought, but Labour very much suffering from this, Alicia.
Yes, well, I think you make a good point in that we are only so recently off the back of the election that I think having a poll prediction quite as large as this is, it's going to raise some eyebrows. I'm sure many people watching this right now are probably sick of hearing the word poll and don't want to think about the next election for quite some time. But what the findings are quite interesting, and it's the first major poll of its kind, so it's worth noting. It says that Labour would lose its majority and nearly 200 of the seats it won in July's landslide victory. 87 of those seats would go to the Conservatives and 26 to the Scottish National Party, with Reform taking 67 from the Labour Party. So obviously the big bulk of those going to Reform. I think that's an interesting finding because clearly, in terms of ideology, the Labour Party and Reform, in terms of the general voter base that they attract, are not something that the public would expect to overlap really at all. So a suggestion here that many constituencies and that many voters could have a view from voting in what is a centre-left government to something that could be a right-wing government is really interesting. And I think it is just too early to say. We really just don't know what's going to happen over the next 4-5 years. So I think it's a big guess, I think.
And also, Labour is in government now. They always said they were going to have to make unpopular decisions. They have, and they have proved to be unpopular. So what do you make of this poll, Aubrey?
There's clearly a deliberate strategy by the Labour Party to try and front-load the political pain so that they take what they would describe as difficult decisions very early on, and that might speak to very gloomy headlines in the first 12 months, but they think it will pay dividends. And if you speak to people in Number 10, they say, look at 2010, when the Conservatives made a raft of really unpopular policy decisions, instituted austerity, and went on to gain a majority at the next election. And the reason they did that is they made some of the tough choices as early on as possible, so that by the time of the next election, they'd cut, raise taxes, and then 2, 3, 4 years later, they could be in a position to start undoing some of that and giving people, sort of better taxation cuts and things like that. I think what these numbers suggest, though, is a very interesting question. Under this MRP, the Tories would be on 222, Reform would be on 72. So that raises the question of, if there is no overall majority in Parliament under this poll, which is completely speculative, obviously, then, would Reform and the Tories be up for doing a coalition deal? That is the sort of single biggest question that jumps out to me from this poll.
What do you think?
Well, clearly, at the moment, no. Although, again, this is 4.5 years hence. And there are people in the Conservative Party, like I think Jacob Rees-Mogg, who suggested there needs to be much greater collaboration between these two parties. It did happen before. Nigel Farage stood down Brexit Party candidates in Tory-held seats in 2019. But is Kemi Badenoch, going to sort of swallow her pride? Does she think that the Conservatives should do that? Would that just lead to Reform usurping the Conservative Party at the election afterwards? These are all questions that will be plaguing the
Those kinds of coalitions can be the norm in other countries.
Absolutely. And, we've had sort of unstable minority governments, confidence and supply deals, coalition governments. But still, Keir Starmer was returned with a thumping majority last time in terms of seats, not necessarily sort of vote share. So I think this will have lots of Labour MPs feeling like Reform are breathing down their necks as well. We're told that several cabinet ministers are set to lose their seats, including Angela Rayner, who's obviously the Deputy Prime Minister, Yvette Cooper, Ed Miliband. So this will have a lot of people worried. All
right, Aubrey, Alicia, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Coming up, among the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Telegraph. The headline, families face £8,000 in New Year tax raid. We'll be right back.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free wherever you get your news.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
The holidays just got merrier and brighter.
It's been everything you'd expect and hope for.
Feast your eyes on our favourite time of the year with gifts galore, magical moments, and holiday cheers.
Snappy and certain, right on the line!
Premier League festive fixtures on USA. Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a 4th indictment? Is it a draw?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Aubrey Allegretti and Alicia Fitzgerald. Let's go straight to the Sunday Telegraph now, even though it's linked to another story as well in the Sunday Times. But let's start with the Telegraph. Families face $8,000 worth in New Year tax raid. Middle classes to be hit by school fees and council levies with threat of further rises, because I think it's Wednesday that the 20% VAT on private school kicks in. So what else is the Sunday Telegraph talking about here?
I mean, it's an interesting framing of this story, I'd say, because it is all based on a few assumptions. It's based on the assumption that a middle-class family with one child would be sending that child to private school. And it's also based on the assumption that that private school charges a certain amount in fees. And obviously, private school fees really, really largely vary. Yeah. So this is based on an average of £7,730 on top, in that VAT, on top of those school fees. But again, a bit of a large generalisation, I'd say, as, you know, not all middle classes send their children to private schools. And, you know, there's only 7% of children across the country actually attend independent schools. I think the other issue here is that this isn't a new policy. There has been so much warning about this. And I think, as Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, says in the other story, which is on the front of the Times.
Yeah, let's pull that up now, the Sunday Times, please.
Slightly interlinked. Yeah. She says, you know, anyone who realised they could not afford or stretch to the extra of these fees has already made those arrangements. They've either found alternate schooling or they found a way to make this work. So this isn't a shock. This isn't new. It hasn't been sprung on parents. That's not to say it won't impact some parents, but, I mean, it's not a new policy. There was time to prepare, and really the amount of people it affects is very minimal.
Aubrey?
So I think there are some valid elements to this story. Obviously, the sort of £8,000 figure that is splashed, you know, in big, bold writing across the top of the Sunday Telegraph. Part of that is due to the national insurance hike to contributions for employers that Rachel Reeves announced in the budget. One of the biggest revenue-raising measures. And as Alicia said, the private schools' fees rising due to the VAT thing being taken away, it was Labour's policy for a long time, although I think lots of parents weren't sure that they would do it and definitely weren't certain that they would do it in the middle of the academic year. Yeah. And it's worth saying that there are about 3,000 pupils the government estimates that will be removed from private schools in the middle of the academic year because this comes into effect on the 1st of January, not the 1st of September. But then moving on to the defence that Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, mounts. She talks in the Sunday Times about how she wants to be the voice of pushy middle-class parents who she says have been priced out of sending their children to private schools. We're told that many boarding schools now charge more than £50,000 a year in fees. And interestingly, Bridget Phillipson says that because of this policy, she's actually received abuse from people who really should know better. There's some rude language there, which I won't mention. But she says that she'll wear that as a badge of honour if it means that we drive up school standards. Now, obviously, people will be saying, look, you say you're going to put this VAT money into recruiting a few more teachers, but across the country,
there's a shortage.
They say it's a drop in the ocean. And obviously, you've also got to look at retention. You're not just talking about recruiting teachers. You've got to keep them there in the first place. So there are lots of issues. And I think it will be interesting to see how Bridget Phillipson fares in the new year. She is probably the cabinet minister that's come under the most heat in the first sort of 6 months of the Labour government.
OK. We just have 1 minute left, but I want to touch on this story, front page of The Observer. Patients at risk as NHS urgent repair costs triple in a decade. So it's not just staff shortages and waiting lists now. The infrastructure is creaking and maintenance is needed.
I mean, yeah, it's just another really awful thing to add to an ever-growing list of issues with the NHS that a government at some point is going to have to tackle. And I think this story really sums that up. It's talking about how the costs in real terms, because of inflation and because of continued issues that have not been addressed, it's now going to cost so much more. And I think that is just a result of numerous governments not wanting to be the government that had to front foot that bill and to face it head on. So now it's very much in the Labour Party's lap, in their domain, I suppose, and now the bill is bigger than it would have been had it been dealt with before.
Briefly?
I think the one sort of point this story raises is that there is a big issue facing the government about how much it wants to invest in infrastructure. How much does it intend to invest to save? This is an issue which obviously costs billions of pounds per year, but the issue we're being told is that cost is ever growing bigger each year because it's not being dealt with. And that means that because buildings are crumbling and rooms can't be used, that's affecting patient care.
OK. Aubrey, Alicia, we're going to have to leave it there. I'll see you in the next hour. Thank you so much. Coming up next on Sky News at 11. The package deals being advertised on TikTok for migrants eager to cross the channel to the UK. I'll have more on that story and all the day's other news at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on.